6th, 2021, early evening in Amsterdam. A 64-year-old man leaves a television studio and walks toward his car. No security, no protection. He's refused it many times. At 19:30, two men step from the shadows. One raises a weapon. 5 shots, 4 hit, head and torso. He collapses. The shooters vanish into the narrow streets. Within minutes, the area is sealed. Within an hour, his name is everywhere. Within 9 days, he's dead. His name was Peter R. de Vries, one of the most recognizable faces in Dutch journalism. Not because he read the news, but because he chased the stories others wouldn't touch. This is what happened, and what came before. Peter Rudolf de Vries was born in 1956 in Aalsmeer, a small town just outside Amsterdam. His father was a market gardener. His mother worked in the flower trade. He grew up in a country still rebuilding itself, still trying to understand what had been lost, what had been allowed to happen. He studied journalism, but he was not interested in reporting events as they occurred. He wanted to know what happened after the cameras left, what remained unresolved, what people stopped talking about. In 1985, he became the crime reporter for De Telegraaf, one of the largest newspapers in the Netherlands. He covered murders, disappearances, organized crime. He wrote with precision. He did not embellish. He did not need to, but it was television that made him a public figure. In 1995, he began presenting a program called Peter R. de Vries. The format was simple. Each episode focused on a single case, often a cold case, a disappearance, a murder that had gone unsolved for years. He would visit the families. He would reconstruct the events. He would appeal directly to the public for information, and often they would respond. Over the years, his program helped solve dozens of cases. Witnesses came forward. Confessions were made. Convictions followed. He became something unusual, a journalist who was also an investigator, someone the public trusted, someone criminals feared. In 1998, he worked on a case that would define his career. The kidnapping and murder of Nicky Verstappen, an 11-year-old boy who disappeared during a summer camp in Limburg. The case went cold. For 20 years, it remained unsolved. De Vries never stopped working on it. He kept the story alive. He kept the pressure on. In 2018, a suspect was finally arrested. DNA evidence linked him to the crime. The trial is still ongoing, but De Vries was not only interested in victims, he was interested in power, in who held it, in how it was used, and in how it protected itself. In the early 2000s, he began investigating organized crime in the Netherlands. Drug trafficking, arms dealing, murder for hire. He reported on the networks that operated quietly beneath the surface of Dutch society. Networks that had grown wealthy, that had become embedded, and he named names. He became the confidant of a man named Nabil B., a former associate of a criminal organization led by a man called Ridouan T. Nabil B. had decided to cooperate with authorities, to testify against Taghi and others. It was an extraordinary decision, and an extraordinarily dangerous one. De Vries agreed to support him, not as a journalist, as an advisor. It was a role that placed him directly in the center of something he had always observed from a distance. Ridouan T was born in Morocco in 1977. He moved to the Netherlands as a child in 1980. He grew up in VNN, Utrecht. By his 20s, he was involved in organized crime. Drugs, primarily. Cocaine smuggled through the port of Antwerp. Large quantities. International networks. Enormous profits. He was careful. He did not draw attention. He did not appear in public. He lived quietly. He moved frequently. He communicated through encrypted channels. By the 2010s, he was suspected of leading one of the most powerful criminal organizations in Europe, but he had never been convicted of a major crime. Evidence was difficult to gather. Witnesses were difficult to find. In 2018, that began to change. A series of arrests were made. Members of Taghi's organization were detained. Among them was Nabil B, and Nabil B made a choice. He agreed to testify, to provide detailed information about the structure of the organization, the murders, the trafficking, the money. It was called the Marengo trial, one of the largest and most complex criminal cases in Dutch history. De Vries became Nabil B's confidant. He visited him. He spoke with him regularly. He offered guidance. He became, in a sense, a bridge between Nabil and the outside world. It was not a decision De Vries took lightly. He knew what it meant. He knew the risks. But he believed in accountability. He believed that silence was a choice, and he chose not to be silent. In September 2019, Nabil B's lawyer, Dirk Wiersum, was shot and killed outside his home in Amsterdam. He was killed in front of his wife in the early morning. As he was leaving for work, it was a message. In 2020, Nabil B's brother was murdered. He was not involved in the trial. He was not a witness. He was simply related to someone who had spoken. Another message. De Vries continued. He appeared on television. He spoke about the case. He criticized the lack of security for those involved. He called for stronger protections. He refused to step back. In June 2021, he was warned by Dutch intelligence services that there was a concrete threat to his life, that his name was on a list, that he should take precautions. He acknowledged the warning, but he did not change his routine. He did not accept protection. He believed, perhaps, that visibility was its own form of safety, that a public figure could not be touched in the same way. He was wrong. The two men who shot Peter R. De Vries were arrested the same night. They were found on the A4 motorway driving away from Amsterdam. Their car matched witness descriptions. A dark, compact vehicle, tinted windows. Inside the car, police found clothing, a weapon, evidence that linked them to the scene. The driver was a Polish national named Kamil E., 35 years old. He had entered the Netherlands only weeks before. He had no permanent address, no employment, no clear reason to be in the country. The shooter was a Dutch national named Delano G., 21 years old, from Rotterdam. He had a criminal record, minor offenses, nothing that suggested he would be involved in something like this. They were both arrested, both charged, both held in custody. Neither of them spoke. De Vries was taken to hospital in critical condition. He had been shot in the head. The injuries were catastrophic. Doctors placed him in an induced coma. His family gathered. The country waited. For 9 days, he remained alive, but he did not regain consciousness. On the 15th of July, his family announced that he had died. They released a statement. It was brief. It was dignified. It asked for privacy. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands gathered in Amsterdam, in Dam Square, in silence. They laid flowers. They lit candles. They stood together in a city that suddenly felt smaller, more fragile. Politicians spoke. Journalists spoke. Colleagues spoke. Everyone said the same thing, that he was brave, that he was irreplaceable, that his death was an attack not just on him, but on something larger, on the idea that the truth could be spoken, that power could be questioned, that journalism could matter. But beneath the tributes, there was another feeling, quieter, harder to name: fear. In the months that followed, the investigation expanded. More arrests were made. Some were suspected of being involved in the logistics, in planning the attack, in providing the weapon, in coordinating the escape. Others were suspected of ordering it. Ridouan T had been arrested in December 2019 in Dubai. He was extradited to the Netherlands. He was already in custody when De Vries was killed. But prosecutors believed the order had come from inside the prison, that even from behind bars, T retained control. In 2023, T was convicted of multiple murders, of leading a criminal organization, of drug trafficking. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. The court called him extremely dangerous, ruthless, a threat to society. The trial lasted years. It was held in a high-security courthouse. Armed guards, bulletproof glass, anonymous juries. Kamal E. and Delano G. were also convicted. Both received life sentences, both for murder, for carrying out the assassination. But convictions did not bring clarity. The question remained: why De Vries? Why then? Why so publicly? Some believed it was retaliation, for his support of Nabil B., for his refusal to be quiet. Others believed it was strategy, a demonstration, a warning to anyone else who might consider cooperating, who might consider speaking. And some believed it was simply inevitable, that a man who had spent decades exposing the worst of what people were capable of would eventually become a target himself. De Vries had always known this. He had spoken about it in interviews, on his program. He had said that fear was part of the work, that you could not let it stop you, that the moment you did, you had already lost. But knowing something and experiencing it are not the same. The Netherlands is a small country, orderly, peaceful. It has low crime rates, high trust in institutions, a functioning legal system. And yet, in the space of 2 years, a lawyer was murdered, a brother of a witness was murdered, and one of the country's most prominent journalists was assassinated in the middle of Amsterdam, in a busy part of the city, surrounded by people. It raised questions that did not have easy answers, about safety, about the capacity of the state to protect those who challenge power, about whether there are limits to what can be investigated, what can be said, and about whether those limits are imposed by law or by fear. De Vries was buried in a private ceremony. His family requested no media, no cameras. He had spent his life in the public eye. They wanted his death to be different. The studio where he recorded his final episode became a memorial. People left flowers, notes, photographs. In the years since, his name has been invoked often, by journalists, by politicians, by those who believe that his death changed something, that it crossed a line that should never have been crossed. But the truth is more complicated, because the line had already been crossed, multiple times, before him and after him. What De Vries represented was not the beginning of something, or the end of something. It was a reminder that the people who ask uncomfortable questions, who refuse to look away, who insist on speaking even when silence would be safer, those people are not protected by principle. or by public affection, or by the belief that someone, somewhere, will step in. They are protected only by the willingness of institutions to defend them, and by the willingness of societies to insist that they be defended. And when that willingness falters, when it becomes inconvenient, when the cost feels too high, then the people who speak become vulnerable, and the people who silence them become bold. Peter R. de Vries spent his life believing that the truth mattered, that it could make a difference, that it was worth the risk. He was right about the first two, but the third remains an open question.